very, very troubling what is going on. And all of this leads me to believe we're going to be reaching in 2024 and into 2025 a great crescendo of demonic proportions, of absolutely demonic proportions. And I'm dead serious. This is of a spiritual nature that is beyond our physical, spiritual, mental understanding. We can understand it to a degree, but there are things going on in the heavenlies that I think that would blow our minds. So I'm not going to tell you that this is the last Ozarks Worldview weekend, but I'm going to tell you the probability of having another one in 2024 is decreasing. I pray if we're still here, folks, we can have one, but I just am very, very, very concerned about what is about to occur in America. These people are so evil. And as we discussed with Colonel John Mills last night, they have weapons the deep state can use, the globalists can use. And I have a friend of mine that was involved in putting up satellites and a rocket scientist and working with an intelligence agency. And I was friends with him and am friends with him and have been friends with him for almost 20 years now. I sent him a video on some of the technology available, and he said, I can indeed confirm that much of that technology exists. Things like, I think, direct energy weapons, not to mention the other things that can be used to terrorize us, to create chaos, to collapse societies. Dr. Woods, welcome to the broadcast. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, brother. Good to be here with you today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about what I just said? I mean, these things are really moving up fast, Dr. Wood.
Well, with Burning Man, I've heard Carl Teichrib speak many times, and so I was familiar with the concepts. And when the news hit about the mudslides, and I said to my 17-year-old daughter, I go, what do you think about this storm that just hit Burning Man? She said, well, I think God's trying to tell him something.
Amen.
And I don't know why anybody in their right mind would want to publicly affiliate with any organization that wants to rebuild the Tower of Babel. I mean, I read my Bible, and that story didn't end too well for the builders. And beyond that, with technology, you can't, the thing about technology, and I'm not a tech person, but I know this much, is once it enters a certain curve, you can't slow it down. It just keeps accelerating and accelerating. And as it accelerates, what we're discovering is the potential for a surveillance society keeps growing and growing and growing. And the day is going to come where we know biblically that technology is going to fall into the wrong person's hands, called the Antichrist. I mean, I enjoy technology like anybody else. We're actually using it right now. But there's a certain exponential curve that occurs with it that you can't just kind of, pull the plug out and say, we're not going to do this anymore. I mean, even some of the quotes by some of the leaders of AI who are just throwing in the towel saying, I don't want anything to do with this anymore, demonstrates that point. And so I appreciate what you said about technology. I appreciate what you said about Burning Man. I didn't know that their demographic was older. And I guess I didn't know that leaders of cities and so forth are going to Burning Man, to replicate the efforts. I knew it was influential, but I guess I didn't know
a lot of big
how
tech.
influential it is.
A lot of big tech people, a lot of them flying on their private planes, a lot of wealthy people. I guess a lot of people are in their 30s, a lot of people in their 30s and 40s and higher, but I guess there's a lot of people in their 30s.
You mean those private planes that wreck the climate? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly right. According to the elite, I don't think they do, but according to the elite, yes.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Well, it's all played by the same rules.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we're entering a time period, Brandon, that God, I think, spoke of more than any other time period in the Bible. And that's the events surrounding the tribulation period. And I think all these things just move towards globalism as demonstrated by Burning Man, the exponential curve of technology. All of this plays into it.
Absolutely. General Michael Flynn, I talked to him the other day extensively and talked to his guy today already, I think 2 or 3 times that we work with. And I did confirm something that General Flynn just tweeted. Joining me again is Dr. Andy Woods. Dr. Woods, let's get right to it. Let's talk about what's going on. Let's start out today with this one right here. Libya's prime minister rejects normalization with Israel following secret meeting of ministers. Let's start with this one right here, as we're going to go through a timeline here of topics that we'd like to do here each and every week with Dr. Woods when he's available, when I'm available. And this first segment, Dr. Woods, we usually do bullet points. What's our first one today?
Well, this is just a Gog Magog update.
Okay.
The famous prophecy in Ezekiel 38 and 39, which we think is yet future, where a conglomeration of nations invade Israel in the last days. And just kind of an update on that, one of those invaders is a nation called Put, which we believe is modern day Libya. If folks get my book, The Middle East Meltdown, The Coming Islamic Invasion of Israel, they'll see the documentation for that. But it's interesting to me that in this age of the Abraham Accords and nations seeking normalization with Israel, now all of a sudden we learned that Libya was having secret meetings, and it came out that they can't enter into a normalization agreement with Israel. In fact, if they were to do so, they would violate their own 1957, Libyan law. And I find this very interesting. And even before I get to that, they talk here about we will never normalize with Israel as these secret agreements were brought to the surface, because they say, long live the Palestinian cause. What's the Palestinian cause? It's the land of Israel that we call the land of Israel without a Jewish presence in that land anymore. That's the Palestinian cause. And Libya is reaffirming that they will not normalize with Israel, and they are hostile to Israel. And surprise, surprise, surprise. That's exactly what Ezekiel 38 and 39 predicts when it predicts Libya would be one of the invaders of the land of Israel in the last days. Conversely, Sheba and Dedan, Saudi Arabia, they're constantly in the news today about how they're about to enter into a normalization agreement with Israel. A normalization agreement with Israel is basically an agreement where a Islamic nation guarantees Israel's right to exist in exchange for trade, travel, tourism, and technology. And because Sheba and Dedan, Saudi Arabia, are about ready to normalize with Israel, that explains Ezekiel 38 verse 13, why the Saudis would protest when this invasion from Iran, Turkey, and Russia takes place. The opposite directions in terms of normalization. And that fits perfectly with the Ezekiel 38 and 39 scenario.
All right, let's go to the next one. Next headline, Jerusalem Post. Iran and Turkey look to new regional strategy. While Iran and Turkey may not always see things the same way, they increasingly share interests. Of course, this again is that Gog Magog Ezekiel 39 coalition coming together with Iran and Turkey strengthening their relationship.
Yeah, it's not just Iran and Turkey moving into posture against Israel. And by the way, that hasn't always been there.
That's right.
Turkey used to be an ally of Israel, as did Iran.
A lot of Israelis used to vacation in Turkey, didn't they?
Absolutely. And Iran was one of the first nations that recognized, the reborn modern state of Israel. So it's not just Turkey and Iran moving into posture against Israel like they are today. It's the two of them cooperating with each other. So it's nation A, nation B against nation C with the motive to invade nation C. And if that weren't prophetically significant enough, now those two invading nations are in cahoots. In fact, one of the last sentences in the article says that's Iran and Turkey, talk together more frequently than the U.S. does with either Iran or Turkey. So more than our government talks to Iran or more than our government talks to Turkey, these two nations are talking to each other. So the invading alliance is now fitting into prophetic orbit as well.
Absolutely. Dr. Andy Woods will be back with more. His is the Kings of the East. The Kings of the East. Dr. Woods?
Well, the Kings of the East, according to the sixth trumpet judgment, Revelation 9, and the sixth bowl judgment, Revelation 16, will basically traverse the Euphrates. The Euphrates, is that demarcating point separating the Far East from the Middle East. But according to Bible prophecy, that river is going to be dried up. In fact, I've actually seen reports recently of how, it seems to be getting lower and lower in terms of, height of water, which I kind of find it's one of those things that makes you kind of scratch your head and say, that's interesting. But at any rate, prophecy indicates that this great conglomerate from the east will traverse the Euphrates River, which will be supernaturally dried up. It will then move into northern Israel for the final battle, known as the Battle of Armageddon. And as this giant army is moving, it will wipe out, 1/3 of the world's population. So the big question is, this 200 million strong army from the east, who is it? Well, the late Dr. John Walvoord, one of the great defenders of dispensational eschatology, the viewpoint that I represent, argued in his 1966 Revelation commentary that this is a reference, among other nations, to China. And so if all of this is true, everything we see in the news today about aggressive, bellicose China, it's just another sign of the time period that we're living in, because an aggressive China is setting the stage for this, end time prophecy that I'm trying to describe. So as you know, Brandon, you cover it every night, China's in the news all the time.
Yep.
Our own administration is in bed with China. We had a Solwell who was having an affair with a Chinese spy. We had the balloon incident where they, took surveillance of our whole military and country. And the Biden administration didn't do anything about it until the surveillance was complete. You have China actually building police stations on U.S. soil to police its own citizens. We all the time hear about the potential imminent invasion of China into Taiwan. And now here's the latest headline from Newsweek.com. China warns U.S. has crossed the red line and warns of lethal consequences.
Yeah, show that, guys.
That word lethal is pretty interesting to me. That kind of sounds like what the Bible predicts, how they're going to wipe out, if I'm understanding all of this correctly, 1/3 of the world's population. And then if that weren't enough, here's another headline. This from one from ScienceAlert.com. U.S. to build robot army. Now, I don't know if that's the solution, but these people think it is. U.S. to build a robot army to counter China's growing power. I mean, why are all these headlines about China and her aggressiveness? Because this is one of the signs that would come into existence just before Jesus came back, according to Revelation 9 and Revelation 16. That's why all this is, very, very intriguing.
And your reference to the return of Jesus, there would be the second coming, not the rapture.
That's correct. The rapture could happen in the next split second. All of these things have to happen prior to the second advent.
Yeah. Here's a headline. If you go over to worldviewreport.com, your daily aggregated news site, where we're constantly putting up new articles. Here's one: China preparing for war. September 6th, brand new article at Gatestone Institute. China preparing for war. And of course, I think this is one way they bring down America. Why is America not listed in the end times? I think America has ceased to be a world superpower. We're losing militarily. We're losing demographically. We're not producing like we should. So again, this is part of the great depopulation plan. America is losing militarily, we're losing demographically, population-wise, we're losing economically, and all it would take is for China and Russia and a few others to bring us down. And that appears to be what China's preparing for. They're preparing for war to bring down America, and the Biden regime is setting up America for that to lose. Here's another one. Russia, China, and North Korea to hold trilateral war games, okay? This is a website. If it'll pop up here, it'll bring us to, there we go, the Libertarian Institute. Russia, China, and North Korea to hold trilateral war games. Of course, we just had a ICBM launched by North Korea. We know that they're really being controlled by North Korea. So again, this goes to that whole coalition of nations that are already going to take out, I think, America, which would, I think, prepare the way for them to move against Israel. Your thoughts, Dr. Woods?
Well, my thoughts are parallel with yours. I mean, Russia is rumbling and China is chomping, chomping at the bit. I don't have a specific prophecy in the Bible for North Korea, but I think I've got clear prophecies for Rosh or Russia and China that I just got finished trying to explain. So is it any big shock that the two would, start cooperating with each other as you're describing, running joint, military exercises? You see, what's fascinating to me is not just the fact that these players are all in place, just like God said they would be at the end of the age, but they're all cooperating with each other. They're forming alliances with each other. And as you watch these alliances develop, you start to wonder, how close are we, to the fulfillment of the prophesied events?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move to the next phase. We talk about Gog Magog. We talk about the kings of the east rising, Israel, China. Let's move now to globalism. Here's an article. Biden says climate crisis is undeniable after the hurricane that just damaged here in America. So
here is Biden, marching in lockstep with this mentality, saying what just happened in Florida related to the hurricane and the heat waves, that we've just seen across the country. That doesn't have anything to do with the climate acting independently of human behavior. We're obviously causing all of it. And it would be laughable if it weren't so funny.
Well, what's also interesting is we may be causing, I say we, man, may be causing these weather events, not from climate change, but from weather technology. I mean, I used to hear that and think that's crazy talk, but now I'm watching videos of meteorologists on TV talking about going out, and they show the airplanes that are all, got the technology where they're seeding the weather, So I'm starting to wonder more and more if some of these events aren't, again, part of the weaponizing of the weather. I'm not saying they are. I'm just questioning now because it makes one wonder if they're causing these things or causing them to be worse than they otherwise would be. Again, it's pure speculation on my part, but anyone could go online and look and see the technology of these planes have been seeding the weather for some time. So obviously the government has been fooling around with these kind of ideas for years.
Yeah, and government causing of a crisis. I mean,
that's
every
their model.
Dictator in human history has tried to do that. All you got to do is Google or read about the Reichstag fire in Nazi Germany that the Nazis caused and blamed it on their enemies and said, put us in power and we'll prevent things like this from happening. I mean, the idea of, government inflicted crises, that's no front page news. It's just the difference between today and Hitler's day is he didn't have the technology, at his fingertips that we have in terms of altering the weather. And so I'm on board. I'm in concurrence with what you're talking about.
Let's go to this next one, then we'll go to break. America's top law schools are teaching students to abandon the Constitution. Well, of course they are, because this fits perfectly with globalism, which is the point we're on, globalism, right? Ignore constitutional American laws and sovereignty. Don't let the Constitution be the supreme law of the land, which we've been ignoring largely. It's now about international law, global law.
Yeah, the greatest straitjacket or handcuffs that's ever existed on globalists is the United States Constitution. Globalism and the United States Constitution cannot peacefully coexist. One of them has to give way. Now, as you know, Brandon, I'm an attorney. I went through law school in the early 1990s, and it was bad back then. They had adopted law schools, the case law method, which basically says it's the judge's opinion of the Constitution rather than the Constitution that is what matters. Well, according to this article, it's gotten way worse because you throw into the mix critical race theory, which demonizes the Constitution as a racist document. And so most people graduating from Stanford, Harvard, Columbia, Yale, etc., are graduating with no knowledge of the Constitution.
Absolutely.
Whatsoever.
Hold right there. We'll come back. We'll get to Mark because, folks, things are changing and they are changing fast. Mark of the Beast technology is showing us that. But I want to skip right away to one of them right here because this again shows us where we're going with Mark of the Beast technology, occultism, whatnot. Stunning proportion of Americans report interacting with dead relatives. I want to jump to this one, which is under occult revival. Then we're going to jump right back to Mark of the Beast technology. I want to go to this one first because it fits with what's happening, sadly, within America, Christianity. Carl Teichrib warned yesterday in our interview live from Burning Man. He said the trend there at Burning Man was how to interact with Jesus. What? At Burning Man? Yeah, through psychotropic drugs or psychedelic drugs to interact with Jesus. So obviously that's a false Christ, a false Messiah that Jesus himself warned about. But he said, watch out, that's going to come into evangelicalism or so-called Christianity. And I said, well, why wouldn't it? We've already got Christian yoga. Christian yoga is an altered state of consciousness, making the natural world dissolve, entering the spiritual realm, which is where you often meet a spirit or master guide, a demon. And oftentimes they encounter an entity claiming to be Jesus. That's what Helen Schucman, who wrote the book A Course in Miracles, the Bible, the New Age, encountered an entity named Jesus and wrote the New Age occultic New Age Bible, A Course in Miracles. Well, obviously a demon posing as Jesus. It's so tragic. Richard Foster, who wrote the book, Celebration of Disciplines, talks about entering the silence, Lextia Divina, centering prayers, soaking prayers, and turning back as your soul leaves your body and seeing your body lying in the grass. He talks about you can encounter Jesus and have a literal physical encounter with Jesus through occultism, renamed. So why would we be shocked that at Burning Man, they're teaching people through psychedelics like Aldous Huxley and Timothy O'Leary promoted to encounter Jesus. And Carl said, watch this enter the so-called Christian realm. So this fits with your last point today before we jump back to Mark of the Beast. Occultic revival, Dr. Woods.
Well, also we could throw into the mix Steve Berger, whose book, I think it's Have Heart or something like that.
Yep.
I mean, basically, and this has been out since 2010, somewhere around there. I mean, this is somewhat dated, but in that particular book, he talks about how he lost a son, and I feel badly for anybody in that predicament, but how his son's name is Josiah, how he and his wife talk to Josiah regularly, and how they show up in their church sanctuary and they can sense Josiah's presence. Well, that's a biblical practice that the Bible condemns from cover to cover called necromancy. Folks, you can't talk to the dead. God says don't do it. In fact, it's impossible to do it because David in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 22 and 23, regarding his son that just died, says, can I bring him back? Answer, no. He will not come to me, but I, presumably after death, will go to him. So you can't talk to the dead. Once you move into the death, you're into the eternal realm where things are fixed. So who are these people talking to? I mean, they're talking to demons masquerading as the dead, who knew the dead, who knew their personality and temperament and, figures of speech and manner of speech and so forth, because demons don't die. So they knew the dead. So they're pretending to be that dead person. And these people that are contacting the dead, they're not talking to benevolent beings. They're talking to malevolent beings, because Satan masquerades himself as an angel of light, and they're opening up deception. And this deception is coming right into the evangelical church via Steve Berger and some of these other people that you mentioned earlier, Richard Foster, and so forth. So the wall that evangelicals theologically used to have to keep all of this insanity out of the church was breached a long time ago. And so I agree with Carl Teichrieb. Watch it become the new normal in the evangelical world.
Well, and that's exactly what Timothy O'Leary and Aldous Huxley said. They said that these drugs, psychotropic drugs, would open up people to new realities, getting them away from the idea of one God, one reality. The drugs were going to help them do that. And they said this is going to happen without you or me. So Timothy O'Leary and Aldous Huxley talking, this is going to happen one way or the other. And now, of course, we see today drugs, pharmaceutical drugs everywhere, pot stores everywhere. It isn't interesting. Again, the word pharmakia comes out of the word witchcraft. And this is a way you can meet a spirit or master guide, is through altered states of consciousness, which you can either do, according to the New Age, through drugs or hypnosis. That's the New Agers saying that decades ago. You can use drugs to make the natural world dissolve into the spiritual world and encounter an entity, drugs or hypnosis. Some of them didn't want to do the drugs. That's why the Maharishi came to America in the 60s to teach transcendental meditation, new name for an old practice, yoga. And now it's Christian yoga in the so-called church. Yeah, what a joke. All right, last one, Mark of the Beast technology. Let's look at this headline. Major League Baseball testing hands-free entry for fans utilizing facial authentication and artificial intelligence security. So Major League Baseball, America's pastime, is going to get people really used to the idea of Mark of the Beast technology. The music's playing. Quick comment and closing, Dr. Woods.
Well, real quick, it says one hitch. The camera captured too many background faces. A problem resolved simply by spacing people out. Aha, now we have the explanation for social distancing.
Well, Dr. Woods. It doesn't work well when you have too many faces, so stand 6 feet apart. We've also heard that satellites and surveillance have a hard time when you stand too close together. You look like one, but you space them apart, then they can monitor you also from satellites and heat imagery and other stuff. AndyWoodsMinistries.org. Stay tuned for Crosstalk. I'm Brandon.